What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today I'm joining in on the fun and doing this Vinyl Tag 2026. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So these Vinyl Tags are always fun to do every year. Essentially, it's just a list of 20 questions to go over, talking about records from your collection or albums you picked up over the course of the last year. This year it was David Atkinson that put the list together. I've seen quite a few of these videos over the last couple of weeks, so I thought it'd be fun to do my own video today. And this is one of the things I look forward to at the beginning of every year because I love watching everyone else's videos and the way they answer each one of these questions, because it's just so different than some of the normal kind of content you get here on YouTube. But I will say, because it is 20 questions, these videos can be a little long, so some of these I will kind of go over kind of fast. So the first question is, show your best vinyl purchase of 2025. Honestly, I didn't buy as many records in 2025 as I typically do. There's one album that I think stood out, at least for me, above all the other ones, and it's something that I've had on my want list for a very long time. And that is Why Do They Rock So Hard by Real Big Fish. This is something that I've had on my want list for literally probably at least 7 or 8 years. And there's been a couple of times I've almost spent a lot of money to buy a copy of it. This finally got reissued last year. It's one of my favorite albums from the later part of the 90s. And the cool thing is about this release is on the D side, they added some live material from the tour. And I think there's 1 or 2 tracks from the Detroit show that I was at. So it's kind of cool to actually have some live material from a concert I was at. Question number 2 is, share your favorite live musical experience of 2025. I don't think I went to a lot of concerts last year. I went to maybe, I think 8 or 9 different shows off the top of my head. I think my favorite one was seeing the Paradox open for Games We Play, which was a concert down in the Shelter in Detroit, which is a very small venue. It's in the basement of St. Andrews Hall in Detroit. I think the max capacity for that place is probably just a couple of hundred people. It's actually the venue that Eminem actually started his career in. And I love seeing bands in smaller venues like that because it has such a completely different energy in a really small, tight, intimate space than in, say, a big, 20 or 25,000 seat arena. Plus, it does help that they put on a killer show. Question number 3 is, your vinyl record collection in 10 years, is it bigger, smaller, or about the same? This is the question I kind of went back and forth on because I want to say it's about the same because I go through my record collection at least once or twice a year and I try to pull stuff out of my collection. I try to go through and pull out, somewhere around, 50 or 60 albums. And it's generally like duplicates or stuff that I bought and I listened to a couple of times and I wasn't a huge fan of, and I'm probably not going to listen to enough to really justify owning a physical copy of it. So it kind of helps kind of thin down my record collection. So I want to say that I'm going to keep it roughly about the same, but I know in reality is probably going to be a little bit bigger than what it is now. I will say that hopefully it's not too much bigger than what it is. Right now I want to say my record collection somewhere around, I think around 1,600 albums. Hopefully it's somewhere, 16 or 1,700 because I got a lot of space and I could add a lot more space down here. I have a lot of space to add more storage, but, as far as like storage goes, I probably have enough storage right now for probably around 2,000 albums. So hopefully, in 10 years it's still less than 2,000 albums. Question number 4 is, you move into a new home, you play one record turned up to 11 and announce your arrival. What is it? I thought this was a pretty easy pick for me. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. It's one album that I own probably way too many copies of, and everyone loves to give me grief for it. That is The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. Even though this is probably my favorite album of all time, I don't listen to this as much as I used to. I think just because I've heard it so many times over the years. This is also an album that I didn't know for the longest time. This is actually one of my dad's favorite albums of all time also, and he just passed away on New Year's Eve. So I think it's another great reason to pick this album. Question number 5 is, show 2 albums, one for each your favorite male and female singers. Male singer for me is going to be Elvis. I grew up listening to Elvis. 68 Comeback Special, is something I've listened to or watched for literally my entire life. Many, many years ago when my wife and I got married, we danced to an Elvis song at our wedding. And I also love how Elvis bridged so many different genres across his career. Of course, early rock and roll, but he also dabbled in blues and country and gospel. I think when it comes to his live performances, when you get in like the early part of the 70s, I think he really hit his stride. You can go on YouTube and watch a lot of those performances. He was just an incredible performer. So it's kind of an easy pick for me. For female musician, that was kind of a harder one though. I ended up going with Cyndi Lauper, and I think mainly because she's so abstract. And she's not the most technically gifted singer, but the emotion that comes through in her songs, were really unmatched. I think with so many other great female singers in the 80s, I think even to this day, she's still very underrated. Question 6 is, we like to have fun here. Show your top 3 soul/dance records. I don't think I have any like dance records. I do have some soul records. The first one I've got is Aretha Franklin, Amazing Grace. Of course, the Queen of Soul. Even though this is more like a live gospel album, still, you can never go wrong with Aretha Franklin. I do have to admit, it took me a really long time to finally come around and listen to more of her catalog, past just the songs that she's known for. I'd say it was probably within the last, 10 or 15 years, I started digging more and more into her catalog and really understanding the brilliance of her music. So that was kind of an easy pick for me. And then another one, you got to go with the King of Soul, Sam Cooke. Of course, he didn't have a really long career, but the music he left behind was just undeniably brilliant. Easily one of the most influential musicians in soul music. So he was kind of an easy pick for me also. And then the third one was kind of a hard pick for me because I decided to go with, because like I said, I didn't have a whole lot to fit into either one of those categories really. I decided to go with Anthology by the Commodores. I guess that kind of falls more into the dance side of that question. I was always a bigger fan of Lionel Richie and his solo material, but without the stuff he did with the Commodores, I don't think he would have had the success he did in his solo career. Question number 7 is a real stinker. Nominate a track you hate from an album you love. This is one that as soon as I read the question, there was one song that came to my mind immediately, and I've hated this song since the very first time I listened to this album. It's off the album Use Your Illusion 2 by Guns N' Roses. The song is My World. And the very first time I listened to this album, it's the very last song on the album. It is a rap song by Axl Rose, and it just does not fit on this album. It is easily the worst thing that Guns N' Roses ever did. And for as great as this album is, that song should have never been allowed to be put on this album. I don't know who was sitting there and said to Axl, yeah, sure, yeah, it's great. Yeah, that'll be perfect to finish up this album. Easily, like I said, easily the worst thing that Guns N' Roses ever wrote. I'm sorry. Axl has no business rapping. Even, this came out in, 91? So I was like 12 years old. Even 12-year-old me hated that song the first time I ever listened to it. And it's never grown on me. There's a lot of parts to question 8. So question 8 is, if you had to pick only one album from each of the last 6 decades, what would they be? So from the 60s, I would go with The Doors' self-titled debut album. I was a huge fan of The Doors when I was a kid. I think probably around 12, 13 years old is when I really fell in love with their music. It's not my favorite album from the band. I think probably Morrison Hotel was probably my favorite album for the longest time. I think LA Woman is probably my favorite album from them now. But this is easily a 10 out of 10 album from the band. And it's one of those albums that if somebody were to tell me you can pick one album from the 60s to sit down and listen to, and only one album from the 60s, this is one that I could listen to forever. And even though LA Woman is my favorite album from the band, I think this one is just a notch better. So that would be my pick for the 60s. For the 70s, this one might surprise some people because of how much I love The Dark Side of the Moon and some of the other albums from the 70s, but I would have to go with Paranoid by Black Sabbath. Even though their first album was popular, I think it was really with Paranoid that, at least in the mainstream, they invented heavy metal. At least this was the album that really popularized it. And that's another one of those instances where I kind of go back and forth. I don't know if it's Paranoid or Volume 4. I kind of go back and forth on which one is the better album from the band. I give Paranoid just kind of a leg up just by a notch. I remember when I inherited my dad's record collection back in the middle part of the 90s, I had his copy of Paranoid. I used to listen to it all the time. So, definitely that'd be my pick for the 70s. For the 80s, I think that's probably the hardest decade for me to pick just one album. I was going back and forth between probably 5 or 6 different ones. I decided to go with Pyromania by Def Leppard. Def Leppard's kind of a funny band because by the time they got to Hysteria, they were almost a completely different band than what they were with their first couple of albums. Really, from On Through the Night through Pyromania, they were more of this like true harder heavy metal band. And by the time they got to Hysteria, they were just a little too poppy, even though I still love that album. Just, I think the pinnacle of the band is always going to be Pyromania. I think it's not only the pinnacle of the band, I think it's really the pinnacle of rock in the 80s. I'm sure a lot of people out there will disagree with that statement, but that'd be my pick for the 80s. My pick for the 90s would be Versus by Pearl Jam. It's an album that I would put this up as, I think, one of the top 5 albums of all time. And it's an album that even, 30 plus years later is still relevant today, theme-wise. The themes on this album are still relevant as today as they were the day this album came out. 10 was the album that made me fall in love with Pearl Jam, and Versus was the album that made me realize how brilliant of musicians that they really were. So that was an easy pick for me. For the 2000s, that's another kind of a hard pick for me. I ended up going with the Untitled album from Blink-182. And as great as Enema of the State was, and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, their Untitled album was a different kind of album. This is where the band started going down this more dark path. I think going into the creation of this album, the band really wanted to have more of a serious tone on here. And it ended up being easily, I think, the best album the band ever did. So that'd be my album for the 2000s. And then for the 2010s were actually kind of an easy decade for me to pick. I decided to go with Damn by Kendrick Lamar. As great as To Pimp a Butterfly was, I think Damn was the album that really got me into his music. It would go on to be one of the best-selling albums that year. It would go on to sell over 3 million copies here in the U.S. and win a bunch of awards. And I think it was the first non-classical album to win the Pulitzer Prize in music also. I think it is and probably will be the best album that he ever does. Question number 9 is, you get the opportunity to spend the day alone with one artist, walking on a mountain trail, the beach, or hanging out in the city. Who would that artist be? I think the first one to come to my mind was Jim Morrison. Not only did he love music, he also loved film and art. So I thought it'd be really interesting to spend a day with him. I just think he'd be a really fascinating person to sit there and talk to, not just about music, but about a lot of things in life. And then the follow-up question to that is question number 10. What would be your must-ask question? And that's kind of what I kind of wrestle with, because I didn't really know, like, if I had to ask him one question, what would that question be? I decided to ask, I don't know. I guess if people remember you for only one thing, what do you hope that one thing isn't? Because legacy can be a really interesting thing, especially for a musician. And especially for a musician like him, it can be really kind of tricky. So I guess I just want to know what he hoped his legacy wasn't. Question number 11 is, show a record that contains a track that always brings a tear to your eye. Or are you a heartless bastard? I guess I'm kind of a heartless bastard, I guess. Because I sat there and thought about it for a while. I spent probably at least 15 or 20 minutes really thinking about this one. And I really couldn't come up with anything. Yeah, I get emotional responses from music, but nothing that ever brings a tear to my eye. At least nothing really kind of came to my mind. Question 12 is, show 3 albums from artists you've tried to love, but you're questioning why you bother. I will say that I don't own albums from artists that I don't enjoy. So I don't have anything to actually show you, but there are some artists that I've tried to listen to time and time again. And I just, for one reason or another, I just can't get into them. Dave Matthews Band is one of them. I just find a lot of the music really kind of generic. I get it. A lot of people love their music, and I hate to be the person that tells you that your favorite band sucks, but, I tried for literally decades, and every time, they release something, I'll try to listen to it. But, I just can never get into it. I'll keep trying, though. Like I said, I'll keep listening to them. That's one band. Another one is Deftones. I think the Deftones have some good songs. At least I'll give them that. I think they've got a handful of decent songs. I'll even go as far as saying White Pony was a really good album. I think probably most of their really good songs are off of White Pony. I've listened to a lot of the stuff they released after that, and I think a lot of it's all kind of the same. Even Private Music. I've listened to Private Music multiple times when it was released last year, and, it's just kind of okay. I didn't think there was anything all that special about it. But that's the great thing about music, is we all like different things. We all have different musical interests. I just don't see the appeal to them. And I guess the third one, is Rush. Rush is another band that I've tried to listen to a bunch of times over the years. At least I kind of have a reason for that one. It's really hard for me to get past Geddy Lee's voice. Musically, they're a great band. It's just the vocals. The vocals just kill me. Question number 13 is, show an album from an artist whose character disappoints you, or you can separate the artist from the art. So one that I love this album, Devil Without a Cause by Kid Rock. I've been a big Kid Rock fan since the early days. I'm talking, grit sandwiches for breakfast back when he had the big eraser top haircut, Polyfuse Method. Early Morning Stone Pimp was a great album also. He's made some questionable career choices after this album came out. Still to this day, I absolutely love this album. But I've long been somebody that can separate the art from the artist. I really don't care what an artist or musician does in their personal life, what they say, what they do. All I care about is the music. Sure, there are some exceptions to that, but very, very few and far between. Question number 14 is, if you had to sell your records along with your turntable, show one album you would hold on to as a keepsake. This is another question that was kind of hard for me. I kind of went back and forth. I've got a few that actually I did a video on the channel a while back where I talked about several albums that I would never get rid of. Actually, one album that I didn't talk about in that video that I would never get rid of is a signed copy that I've got actually framed up on my wall of one of my favorite punk albums of all time, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo by MXPX. It's kind of in an odd place on my wall, so I'll see if I can find a good direction or good angle to take a picture of it and put it up on the screen here. But if I had to sell everything else, that's one that I definitely know I would never get rid of. Question number 15 is, discuss your VC highlight of 2025. If that's a video, link to it, but it could be a meetup or some event. I don't know. I had a couple of them this year. I think one for me was going over 900 videos on YouTube here, excluding YouTube Shorts. It was an Alkaline Trio reaction video. I didn't really do anything special for the occasion, but at some point over the next couple of months, I'll hit 1,000 videos, which is kind of cool. It's something I never really thought about, when I started doing videos back in 2020. Also, a couple months back, I had my fastest video to ever hit 20,000 views here on YouTube, which was a record store day controversy video that I did. But 2025 was a great year on YouTube for me. I had a lot of milestones that I hit over the course of the year, but I don't know. Those are kind of like the two that came to my mind at first. I'll put links down below in the description if you want to check out those videos. Question number 16 is, name your favorite musical biopic if you have one. I've got a few of them. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there like me that not only collect records, but also collect movies. I said it for a long time that you should own your entertainment, whether it is music or movies. But I've got a few biopics that I absolutely love. One, this is actually kind of hard one to find. So this is Backbeat. I don't know what year this came out, like early 90s. This is the story of the early Beatles with Stuart Sutcliffe and Pete Best. It's a hard one to find, but it's a good one to watch if you're unfamiliar with it. Of course, The Doors. It's another classic one. I grew up watching that one. Kind of a newer one, Straight Outta Compton. It's another great one I love watching. One that I guess this isn't technically a biopic. It's semi-autobiographical, and that's 8 Mile, based off of Eminem's life. It's not really truly a biopic. And then another one, what year was this, like 86 or 87 when this came out? Mid-80s, but La Bamba. Of course, another classic musical biopic. Question number 17 is, give 3 reasons why jazz matters and show a favorite album. Jazz is a genre that I really just started getting into, I'd say within the last, 6 or 7 years. But it's easily become one of my favorite genres of music. But jazz music really helped shape the DNA of modern music. Yes, there were other genres of music in the early 20th century that also played a role in shaping music. But jazz music really helped develop the structure of music that we know today. The individuality, the creativity, the freedom of jazz music, all while playing together as a unit. No two jazz performances are ever going to be the same. It's almost as unique as your fingerprint. Jazz music is just beautiful. As far as my favorite album goes, though, John Coltrane is my favorite jazz musician. It would have to be a Coltrane album. I kind of went back and forth. A Love Supreme was the album that got me into jazz music. I think Blue Train is probably my favorite album from him, though. If you've never listened to jazz music and you want to try to dabble in something, I think this is a great one to start with. Question 18 is, you're an innocent man on death row. They give you one last musical request. What do you ask for? I tried to have a little bit of fun with this one. I tried to find something that was really obnoxiously long. I'm probably going to butcher this guy's name, but this is by Dr. Jagadish Pillai, I think is how you say it. I'll put his name and the name of the song up on the screen here because I'm not even going to attempt to say the name of this. This is based off of Hindu poetry, and it's, like I said, obnoxiously long. It's 138 hours, 41 minutes, and 20 seconds long. So at least it would buy me, it's like 6 days. It's over 6 days long. So it would buy me some extra time, I guess. Question number 19 is, sell, quote unquote, sell your favorite artist to a new listener, show one essential album, and explain why they should make time for it. This is one that, like, I don't feel like I should have to sell. I'm not going to sell anybody on anything. If you're not a fan, that's cool. I've said it for a long time that, you know, if we all like the same thing, music would be really boring. All this would be really boring. It's the differences in all of our musical interests that make all this really kind of fun. But I'll at least tell you I don't have one favorite artist or one favorite band or musician. I've got, 3 or 4. I'll tell you probably my top 3 and my favorite album from each one of them. And none of these are ranked in any kind of order. I don't know who my favorite band or musician is. I just have like a group of who I really like. Pink Floyd is definitely one of them I'd have up there. So, of course, Dark Side of the Moon. It's a great album to listen to. I think it is their best album. I also think it's probably the best album of all time. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, though. And that's why I said, I'm not going to try to sell anybody on anything, but I think it is a great album of theirs to listen to. If I had to pick one album, I think that is the essential release from Pink Floyd. Another one of my favorite bands is Blink-182. I think their Untitled album is the best thing that they ever recorded. And this is where the band kind of left some of that more punk rock stuff behind and started going down this more emo path. That's why I thought it was perfect to have Robert Smith appear on a song on here because, you definitely hear the influence he had on this album. So it's a great album to listen to by Blink-182. Another one of my favorite bands is MXPX. I already talked about Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. One of my favorite punk albums from the later part of the 90s. It was released back in 1998, and it was punk music before punk music really got overly commercialized in the very end of the 90s and in the early part of the 2000s. So yeah, it's just another great one to check out. And then finally we made it down to question number 20, and that is you're arranging a VC meetup in 2026. Excluding those you've already met, invite 3 people you'd most like to meet. One would be Trevor from Flat Round and Spun. Trevor is a very long time member of the Vinyl Den Facebook group, and I always enjoy watching his YouTube videos. So he'd definitely be one I'd have on the list. And probably Dylan from Noble Records. I've gone through the Charlotte area multiple times over the last few years, and every time I drive through that area, I always think to myself, man, I gotta drive through and stop at his record store. And then for some reason, something always happens on the drive down. And for some reason, I never have time to stop. But he seems like a really interesting guy. He's got a great YouTube channel. I think he'd be a great one to hang out with. And then my third and final one, I guess, would be, G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl. Another one with a great YouTube channel. Seems like a really knowledgeable guy. And I thought for a long time about owning a record store, so he'd be a great one to pick his brain. But if you want to check any of them out, I'll put links down below in the description for their channels also. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Pick a couple of questions off this list. I'll put the list down below in the episode description. Just pick a couple of the questions and answer them down in the comment section. Like I said in the beginning, I really enjoy watching these vinyl tag videos every year. You really get to see kind of a different side of people through their answers on these videos. But let me know what you guys think. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.